You have the same 24 hours as Michael Jackson and decided to become nobody. Comfort breeds weakness. Comfort will have you missing out on opportunities to become a better version of yourself. People used to rap against drug abuse, and now all of the rappers are junkies and they rap about doing drugs. Angry people can't solve problems. When you try to solve problems with your body, you're no longer using your mind, and that is intentional.
All right, guys. This has been some time in the making. I have been studying this guy for a while. We've had some conversations here and there, but I was like, listen, man, stop it right here. We're going to have a full on interview, me and you, and we're going to talk about everything we want to talk about. So finally, we made it happen. I have the honor, the pleasure to have on my couch, my podcast, Sanu. How you
Thank you
doing,
for
man?
having me, brother.
Of
I
course,
really
of course,
appreciate
man.
it. Yeah.
We've already talked about this, but I want you to share to everyone what is the origin of your name. Let's start from there.
So my name Sanu Neframin. The origin of it is from the Kemetic language. It's ancient Egypt. So this is prior to, I guess, what we now know of like modern day Egypt.
Both of your parents were like into like
No, not,
ancient like
no.
philosophy or
My name was given to me by a queen mother in a traditional, I guess, a traditional kind of African community that was formed called the Asaraset Society.
oh wow.
And so I had a counselor or a queen mother who basically gave me my name. So if we put it in this ancient context, there was a language called Kemetic, and my name basically means divine will is my success. So my name is not just something that people call when they want me to turn my head. Every time someone says my name, particularly the full name, they're basically speaking to my destiny. And I made it my legal name because that's what I wanted to put on my children's birth certificate. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Wow. You're you're from Los Angeles, right?
Yes.
Born and raised in LA.
Yes.
You told me a little bit about where you grew up in your neighborhood and all of that. Can you like share a little bit about like how was like growing up in a? I mean, I listened to a lot of hip hop, so I kind of like
Right.
got an idea of the dynamics, but obviously I didn't grow up there, so I have no idea.
Right.
How was it?
Some of what it is that you hear in the songs and see on movies is true, but I want you to consider that that's probably a small percentage of the experience that a lot of people were having. Like the neighborhood I grew up in Watts, California, and while we did have the contradictions of like gangs and crack and all this other stuff, we also had very close knit community. All the food that I ate growing up was fresh, grown right there, sometimes in Watts, because you got to think about like the people who occupied that area. They all migrated from places that were very agriculture based,
Okay.
and so we had butchers, we had farmers markets type situations where people would do exchanges and things like that. So the context of it was not just the things that are kind of promoted about it, right? And we can also go to the fact that Watts is kind of like the Harlem of the West Coast. So if you know anything about Harlem, you know that there was a sort of a Renaissance period where you had artists, musicians, poets, writers, right? So Watts was kind of like that on just in LA.
Okay.
So a lot of your acts that would come out to Hollywood for performance and recording, they would often take up residence and spend time in Watts, like Charles Mingus and people like that.
Huh.
So Watts has a very rich tradition in terms of art, but also in terms of sports. We have a lot of sports stars that have come out of there, and things like that. So it's one of those places where you have a lot of different things that overlap, and violence and all that other stuff included. But my childhood growing up, I have a lot of great memories about it.
That's fascinating, man. Because I mean I'm from Florence, so that is like the Renaissance epicenter in let's say like the Western world. But I find it fascinating that you say that where you're from was also considered like a Renaissance place. What do
Absolutely.
you think? What do you think were the reasons why there was such a richness in I don't know, like culture and
I think it might have had a lot to do with migrations from the South, and I like to put a lot of things in history into context. So we have to understand that a lot of the people that came from the South or may have had roots, let's say in Africa, right? The so-called slaves. I don't often like using that word. I say people who were enslaved and not slaves, right? But they had an identity. That identity included art. That identity included culture. That identity included music, right? That identity included all these things. And so when you have this great rush into the urban areas as we get into like the 1950s, like the World War II economy, and
yeah,
people started to move to the cities
because
because
there's more
of
like job opportunities or
exactly
whatever.
more job opportunities, the land of home ownership and things like that. When that starts to pop up, you know, you have a collection of people, right, who are more leaning towards education, leaning more towards the new way of doing things. And so I think that's part of the reason why. But that has its origin in this story of all of this talent that was pulled up in the southern states. So when people came there, they came with their tied to culinary arts, right? So I remember growing up in the Nickersons. I mean, even to this day, you can go there and people cooking gumbo.
Gum was like the from
From
Louisiana
Louisiana. Yeah, from
that you
Southern
mix like
Louisiana.
fish
Yep.
and
Yeah, and it's a like it takes a while to cook gumbo, and there's an
yeah.
art to cooking gumbo. There's a right way to cook gumbo and a wrong way, and
I
even
never
though,
had it, so I don't
yeah,
know.
I mean, even though I'm a big proponent of plant-based diets, and I have been on one for a while, anybody who tells me that they're going to give me vegan gumbo, I can't accept it. You can call it something else, but you can't call it gumbo. You know what I mean? So, but you have all of that richness that comes from people who are coming from different instances. Just like we can think about the transatlantic slave trade bringing people into an instance, or people just coming from all over the world, because if we look at Louisiana, you have all the overlaps of different cultures from,
Like French.
French, yep, Spanish influence, African, the Native Americans. And so now you have this richness in culture, and now that starts to spread out, and
I mean, man, that's how I look at America, honestly.
yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
huge, like,
Yep. An amalgamation of cultures.
yeah.
And which is why English, as we speak it, is sort of a bastardized language. It has a little bit of everything within it. So, yeah, but I think that's part of the reason why you just have these culmination of forces that kind of rush in from these different places and spaces, and it creates this rich experience because people start to patch things together and innovate new things, new ways of doing things.
So, man, going back to like the neighborhood, like well, you said, like there was a close community, like
Mhm.
were you guys like I don't know, planting foods together or like having like your own
Yeah,
farmers
I would
markets
I wouldn't
or
say it was anything like that. Now we did have instances where you understood who to go to for what,
oh yeah,
right? Like so, like growing up, we had like the candy lady. That's a very special thing inside of most housing projects that you find in LA,
okay,
right? So there's this person who goes and gets all of these goodies and she sells them out of her house. We
okay,
also had this woman named Miss Sue, who was Asian, and she was the egg roll lady. Made egg rolls in her kitchen and sold them out the back door.
and that was
Right?
like her hustle.
Yeah, it was her gift to the community. I would think of it as, because her egg rolls was a bomb. And so, and then you also have to think about how economics ties into this. So the Nickerson Gardens, the housing project that I grew up in, that was the largest housing project west of the Mississippi.
No way.
Right? Yeah. And, all of those projects were built to house workers initially, right? So you had people who were coming there that were working in factories. And then you also had like the people who were coming there for because they joined the military.
Okay.
So when you have all this, you have this housing bust. I mean, this housing boom, and it's sort of like, where do you put all these people, right? And so they create these public housing projects, and this was kind of the epicenter of where a lot of the workers would live and things like that. So when you go, the way that these things are built, they're built out of like this cinder block type construction, and then you go in, the floors aren't very it's kind of like linoleum floors or typical floors that you would find in a commercial
Yeah, because it's
building
like
almost.
cheap,
Yeah,
cheap to make.
right. And it was never really meant to be permanent housing. I don't think that those things were designed to be permanent housing. I think they were kind of like thresholds for ushering you into, you come here, you work, you get your money, and then you go and buy a home
Yeah,
and
yeah.
sort of that cycle, right? But it just so happens that over time there's an erosion of the economy, the local economy, right? And so as corporations start to open up business in other areas, and they find politically, there are things that happen where it's cheaper for them to do business in other spaces. So
Uh-huh.
now, instead of having our factory in Southern California, we're going to go open our factory in Mexico or somewhere else where labor is a lot cheaper, and we can kind of save money and, make more money.
So all of these people, all of a sudden, they were unemployed.
Correct. So now you have this downturn in employment, and people just having to make a way out of no way. And so, our brains take up a great majority of our of the energy of our, usage of our energy usage in our body for a reason. Is because people are going to figure it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have this urban context. There's a lot of things happening in and around us, both politically and economically, and so now you have all these shaping factors that give rise to people figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
And that gives rise to a candy lady. That gives rise to a Miss Sue who sells things out of her backyard. It also gives rise to a robust drug economy.
Mm.
So, and we also need to add into this the experience of black political leaders, right? The Black Panther Party, the US organization, they all had factions that were operating both in the Bay Area and Los Angeles and other cities. And when the government turned and started locking all the leaders of those instances up, what you have left is you know, a lot of young people that don't have guidance anymore. I'll just put it like that.
Why do you think, man, the let's say the government was going after these black political leaders? Why were they considered so important, so dangerous?
Well, that's a good question. And I think it would be something that, if we study the text, it was just seen as a threat, I think largely because America has thrived off of the boogeyman concept. There always has to be a other. There always has to be.
To be scared of?
Yeah, we see it now with the whole, rhetoric surrounding immigration. And I'm not saying that we don't want things done in the right way, but I am saying that when you can create a boogeyman amongst the minds of the people that you want to control, right? There you have it. And so,
So for a long time, the boogeyman was the black man,
yeah, and the
and
Black Panther
and
Party and
and now is
these
the
Negroes with these
immigrant.
guns. As a matter of fact, I'll go on record and say that every single gun law that we have in this country that tries to control gun ownership can be traced back to keeping guns out of the hands of black people. Every single one. I mean, and we would have to go and look at different instances like the Black Codes and how those echo forward. The demonstration that the Black Panther Party had on, the steps of City Hall that led to them, sort of enacting this law about like, having guns in public space and so on and
Yeah.
so forth. So there's that. Antonio Gramsci came up with this concept called hegemony, or I think it's pronounced hegemony, or some people say hegemony or hegemony. But what it basically is how larger, your larger, powerful government seeks to control the social structure,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so they do that by manipulating ideas about things and using words that people have an emotional tie to or develop an emotional tie to.
Music. I mean, wasn't hip hop a
Correct.
way to brainwash a certain
Well,
part of the culture?
hip hop actually started as
Well, I mean,
yeah,
originally started from a good
right.
place.
It was a way for people to demonstrate artistic expression, and it was free from any restriction of hiding things, right? So people told the truth and about who they were, and then you had the braggadocious element, like, "Hey, I'm the man," right? So it's a way of bigging yourself up, bigging up your crew, so on and so forth. Um, and it's interesting that people used to rap against drug abuse, and now all of the rappers are junkies, and they rap about doing drugs. So
And do you think there's an agenda behind that?
absolutely,
I agree.
absolutely, because you got rappers who never touched Percocet rapping about it. Future.
So man, let's go back to like to your own upbringing. So people in the neighborhood, are they aware of all these dynamics that happen on a larger scale?
No, and I think it's because the dumbing down of every population in America, I think, is something that benefits people who profit from that stupidity, right? Or from that dumbing down. So people don't have a very long historical memory. I find that just in general, or even a global idea of the world and a connection to the world in a global way. I mean, you have people who are chanting for war. You pull out a map and they can't show you where Iran is. They can't show you where any of these countries that they're talking about wanting to be bombed are, right? But they have a public opinion about it. Why? Because that public opinion is fed to them. And I think just like that, you have people who live in Watts and other places who have no historical memory of what came before or and therefore no idea of what can come after because they don't know where they're echoing from. And so I think that there's a almost this intentional separation of people's current mind from history. And that takes place in the education system, right? How people are educated becomes like the thing that they respect more, right? So it's like if we start to take certain aspects of history out of school and people no longer remember it, then we can make up whatever we want.
But then again, man, let me play devil's advocate. Even like the so-called education, like a lot of that is also like a form of brainwash,
It
right?
is. It
Like
is.
people that go to like big universities and colleges,
Right.
they all get influenced by a certain mindset, and that's not necessarily the
Right.
truth. It's just
Correct.
that side of
Yeah.
the truth, which is not universal.
Right. And that's why I think that it is the responsibility in Africa. They had oral traditions. They had people who were considered to be griots, and they told stories about what happened before. The Native American tradition, they had these sort of instances where they would say that every person who was alive in a generation has to know what happened at least 7 generations back, and think 7 generations ahead. So when you have that type of thinking baked into your culture, you don't run into what it is that we're talking about now with like people not having a historical memory because you have to understand
You're
where
connected to your
right,
ancestors or your
right,
lineage,
yeah,
so you don't get swayed by
exactly, yep.
the fads of the
And you
moment.
have some people who don't even they will argue people will argue about concepts from ancient history, but they can't even tell you what their grandmama ate for breakfast. And that's the type of world that we live in now because history has a vertical aspect and a horizontal aspect. You have the vertical line, that's your family, right? These two people got together and they begat these people and da 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 da, da, right? And so that's how it lays out, right? And that's your genealogy. And then you have the horizontal aspect of history, the culture, society, time that these people live in. So that would be the horizontal strata. So I think that because there's no understanding as to how all of that stuff intersects, people start to think about history as a very linear thing. and it's an all or nothing game for them.
Well, man. But so okay, let's go back to your personal journey. So you grew up in Watts,
Hmm.
and then how long did you live in LA? Because I know you moved around a little bit.
Right.
What
So
happened?
I lived in LA until I was probably about 14 years old. We moved out like right before the Rodney King insurrection.
92, right?
Like yeah, 92.
LA riots.
Yeah. And that's the thing, the other thing. So I like what you have there with words have power. I have decided to take a definition of power and use that. So I think it was Neely Fuller said that power is the ability to define the world and to have others accept that definition as their own and to run with it, right? So when people say riot, right, it sounds like this thing that just didn't have any conscience, that didn't have a origin. It was just people burning stuff up. The Rodney King insurrection was a lot of tired people. Tired. They were tired. They were tired of the establishment. They were tired of the conditions. They were tired of the lack of resources. They were tired of police violence. They were tired of white violence coming from West LA. They were tired of these are generally tired people, and then they get up and act in this manner.
It was a pressure cook
Yeah, it was a
that
pressure
was
cooker
sudden.
moment, and that's what I think of all insurrections, especially the ones in urban areas, the ones that led that stem from Martin Luther King getting killed, like all of those things, what they would call the Watts riots, all those things were pressure cooker moments because it's like you had a subjugated group of people who were just trying to live their lives, and here you have this instance where you have this thing that happens and now everybody's up.
It sounds something that we've seen fairly recently.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's the same
It's the
dynamics
same dynamic.
that
And
happen,
again,
repeat.
that's something that can also be socially engineered because angry people can't think. You see? Angry people can't solve problems. When you try to solve problems with your body,
Mm-hmm.
you're no longer using your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that is intentional, right? So anyway, going back to the Rodney King insurrection, we moved out of there right before that happened. We moved
Were you
to
guys, you and your family, were you sensing that something was about to happen, or
no,
it was just
I'm gonna tell the truth about it. I got into some trouble.
okay?
I got into some trouble, and I think my mother and my stepfather they wanted to move anyway. But yeah, I had gotten into some trouble at the school I was at. I kept getting kicked out of school actually.
Huh.
I got put on probation for possession of a weapon on school grounds, and just a number of other things, man. So it's like
How old were you?
I was probably about 14 then. But again, environment breeds behavior, and when you're looking at now, my mother was, I mean, good Christian woman, always into the church as far back as I can remember. My stepfather, he was actually in a motorcycle club, which is a very big thing on the West Coast.
Is that like Hells Angels, that kind of stuff?
It's sort of, but the black version. You know
Okay,
what I mean? So,
like Harley Davidson,
hmm
always like
yeah,
riding around.
yeah. So, but there's a lot of that. There's a lot of that in the culture on the West Coast. So, but again, he turned his life to Christ, and I mean, they still doing that to this day. So,
Wow.
but I think that when I stepped off the porch, the things that I saw, like it was different. It was a different world than the one that my family may have tried to shelter me from. Because you got to remember, I was in the Nickerson Gardens, and we lived in what was considered to be sort of this triangulation of violence between these three different housing projects. You had the PJs, you had the Nickersons, and then you had the Jordan Downs. Then you had others over there, Hacienda Village, so on and so forth. And these gangs were just kind of like, boom, right? So you had that, and I think that environment made us very comfortable with violence in a way that is not natural to what I would call human nature.
Hmm.
I think human nature has in its proper context is to actually build things, right? and to harmonize with the world around you.
Collaborate and all
Yeah,
that.
but on the other side, you have the other side of that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So you were exposed to both
I was
realities.
exposed to both realities. I witnessed my first murder when I was 7 years old. Several murders after that.
Was it people that you knew?
Um, when I was 13, I lost a friend of mine that I did know. We were, somewhere that we probably shouldn't have been, and I
Yeah.
witnessed him, get killed. So, um, but again, like seeing shootouts on school bus, all kinds of stuff. But even with those things in the environment, I still had a thirst for learning. I still had a thirst for culture outside of that because I would often go to like poetry readings and things
Hmm.
like that. We had this place in California, in LA called Lamert Park. And if you go to Lamert Park now, what you find is like a lot of drumming circles and things like that. I mean, and that's been there for a while. But back in the day, it was kind of like the Watts Towers. The Watts Towers was is a cultural center there in Watts, California.
Hmm.
And as a matter of fact, when we started getting to talking about like me and architecture, that was the first desire that I had to build buildings was visiting the Watts Towers. If you can imagine,
I've seen photos, man. I couldn't like picture in my mind how that place looks like because it's in the middle of this neighborhood and you
right,
have like this
this tower,
iconic,
yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah, yeah. And
That
so,
was built with materials of
yep,
like how do you say it?
concrete and stuff
A
that he
mix of
found,
different
like
things, right?
glass and stuff like that he found on the street. And actually, Simon Rodia, he was actually Italian.
Really?
Yeah,
The architect?
yeah. Well, he wasn't an official architect.
Yeah,
But
the one that
yeah,
designed
but the person that did it, and I guess we can't call him an architect. He didn't have a license, but yeah, I mean, he's an architect. He influenced me to want to do it. So, you
Why did
know,
they decide to do it there out of all the
because
places?
that's where he lived.
Oh,
That was
okay.
his home,
So
right?
he
And he
wanted to
would
give
just
something
he
back to
would
the.
no he that was his home. That was what he wanted to surround himself with.
Oh,
So he came there and he made that beautiful. And I remember reading that Buckminster Fuller compared that to Gaudi's work. If I'm remembering correctly, or somebody compared it to Gaudi's work. I think it was Buckminster Fuller,
there
but
was a visionary. This guy was a visionary. I think I read one of
yeah,
his books.
yeah,
Like he had this idea of the world, how it will be, and all that. And
mm-hmm,
he was completely like disconnected from the status quo of
yep,
the era.
yeah, a futurist, if you will, and that's
Huh.
why he made buildings the way that he did.
Huh.
But I think that looking at that, and then there were other places. I mean, there were basic buildings that people would consider like pretty regular, but I looked at the style of them and I was like, that's interesting because it's very different from everything else. And then kind of traveling around LA, you start running into things, the Eames House in the
Oh
Palisades,
yeah.
and when I got a taste of all that stuff, I'm like, I want to be an architect.
Did you have someone in your family that was like, I don't know, like creative or into like art, and you got that
Yeah,
from?
yeah, yeah. So I think that a lot of the engineering kind of logical aspect I kind of got from, well, my uncle Willie James. He was in the army, and then I have an uncle named Junebug. He now lives in Mississippi, and he makes bikes. He makes these. He takes these parts and he assembles these little parts out of like beach cruiser like bikes. He was the first person I ever saw a motorized bike from.
Huh. He
So
built it.
yeah, he builds it. He builds them now, right? So I think having men around me that were like that,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then I think some of it is just in my DNA. Like I didn't meet my grandmother on my father's side, but when people tell me stories about her, I'm like, yo, something echoed down because this woman was reupholstering furniture and selling it and making wigs by hand
Uh
and
huh.
like so, and my mother's very creative. She used to make my clothes.
No way.
My mother used to make clothes for me to wear to school. So like as far as artists, there's that. I mean, and it's not like these people became meaning the people that were around me that were creative did it because they were trying to make money or whatever. They just did it because they were
It
creative.
was just part of
Yeah, it
their
was just part of
persona.
their everyday. And then when we started looking at the Mexican people in my community, same thing. most of the stuff, like most of my Mexican friends, I would go over to their houses, and the stuff that they had that their moms and the abuela was making stuff with was made by hand.
Uh-huh.
They made stuff like, so there was this like craftsmanship that was all around me, and so I think that did inform like me here. That informed me here. Like
Mm-hmm.
doing things by hand means something, because now as this thing ages, you can pass this down and say, "Hey, your grandmother made this," right? I think that's a big part of that for me.
I mean, man, I've been like studying American culture for many years, and I feel that those years, like the 70s, 80s, 90s,
Hmm.
both in the West Coast, like LA and New York City, were years where there was a lot of like culture being
Yeah.
like always innovating, like whether it's in the movies,
Right.
well, you know, Hollywood, like music industry, the art. So I feel that if you were born in those areas,
Hmm.
you absorb all of that, and you kind of like
Absolutely.
were born in a place that had a lot of richness. So
Right.
I'm sure you absorb a lot of that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the thing is, we keep using this word culture, and I want to talk a little bit on that. Culture is just a network of artificial responses that we kind of pass around. Either it's passed down vertically from generation to generation, or horizontally across groups of people.
Hmm.
So we can pretty much make up the rules of what culture is. And we've done that. I mean, we have people who cling to old ideas of culture and refuse to let them go, even though they don't fit into the modern context.
Well, for example, when we live in a place that has a certain culture,
Hmm.
whether you associate with it or not, it's another story. But Miami has a certain
A
culture,
certain
as we
culture,
both
right?
know,
Yeah,
for
and
example.
and
So
people have an emotional tie to what Miami is culturally, and therefore they have their negative ideas about it. They have their positive ideas about it,
hmm
but they have ideas that stem from their ideas about Miami culture and what it means.
I've noticed that for I'm not going to go into too many details, but people believe in this idea of Miami's culture so much that they make decisions based on this idea that
Hmm.
they have, not necessarily on what the reality is.
Correct.
But they've been fed this idea, so they live their life based on this idea, which has no real
Yeah,
tangible.
no substance at all.
You understand
No
what I'm saying?
substance at all. This
I
is
was like,
something.
oh, but this is the way it is here, so I'm gonna behave
Hmm.
based on that. But
Right. Yep. Exactly. And that's the other thing. Environment breeds behavior. So when you are involved in that aspect of the culture, right? And now your behavior dictates, and now you're explaining this as who you are. Is it really?
hmm
Right? Now we have to question the integrity of, you know, like who you say you are in the face of this cultural idea that you decided to accept. So, and again, that's something that has a lot of truth, no matter where you're from, or where you find people drop themselves or insert themselves or whatever.
let me ask you this, man. It's coming to me, but I've already noticed that you've always. It feels like you've always were very individualistic in the way that you are. Does it come natural to you, or you had to struggle to find your own uniqueness, and now you just wanna be like who you are, or I don't know,
No,
because
I
I've had a similar like journey, so I'm curious to know
yeah,
your story.
I I think for a long time I've been my own man. I mean, and there are some days I had to fight for that. I mean, literally, physically fight people. But I think it's because when people understand that they can't just tell you what to do, and then you just follow suit. Like for instance, I remember getting into a fight at Markham Middle School, because so I'm gonna just tell the whole story. They had these little baseballs. I think that year the Dodgers did really, really well. I don't know if they won a championship, or I think it was a championship. They
This
won the
was the
World Series
Los Angeles
in Los
Dodgers, not the
Angeles.
Brooklyn.
Los Angeles Dodgers, yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, we had these screen print baseballs that ended up at our school somehow. I don't know where they were from, but I just saw, and I was in love with baseball. So I saw this teacher had this box full of these baseballs, and I'm like, yo, they were just kind of sitting on the table in this section of the school we call the bungalows.
Uh huh.
So I go in there and I grab a handful of them, like maybe two or three of them, and like walk out. And so this guy, he tells on me. And so he tells, and I mean, we get into a fight over it. And stemming from this fight, people start getting word around that me and whoever this guy was got into a fight, and his family was from some gang called Treetop Paru in Compton, right? I didn't know anything about that. I just fought the dude because he told on me. Word got around the school that I got jumped on to Treetop Paru,
Uh-huh.
right? So this is what everybody's saying because I got into this fight with this guy, and I'm like, I'm not from no Treetop. I just, yeah, me and him had a fight, and that was it.
Uh-huh.
And so everybody's like, oh, you from Treetop now? I'm like, no, I'm not. You right? And so he starts carrying the narrative around because it benefits his reputation
Uh-huh.
for being a tough guy, even though he got smoked during the fight. Um, so, and then I had to fight several other people after that just because they kept running up to me saying, yeah, this is where you from. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm my own man. You're not going to tell me what. And this is me in middle school. So
Uh-huh.
you can just imagine as I got older and my nervous system got more developed. But yeah, I've always been like, you're not going to sign me up for something that doesn't make sense to me. And when I looked at gang culture, it didn't make sense to me. So you mean to tell me that if I decide that I'm from this neighborhood, I can no longer be friends with those people over there that I grew up from the sandbox with, had have history with, and now they got to be my enemies just because of the color that they wearing or the where they just so happen to live at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
We all getting shipped around because home ownership is doing this, and furthermore, if you live in a project, you don't own nothing anyway.
Did you have like episodes in which like your friends that you grew up together, they distanced themselves because they were part of a
A part of
different?
the, yeah, I mean, so yeah, there was a lot of that. I lost a lot of close friends and
Because
associates
they bought into that
because they
narrative.
bought into the narrative, and it's just kind of like, yeah, this is where I'm from and it's what I gotta do. And then that's the other thing, becoming crash dummies for your big homies because they selling saying stuff and they sending you off on to go do stuff, and that lifestyle never made sense to me. And I never, I mean, I understand it from the perspective of some people don't have cohesive families. You know, you have people who lose their family to the system, whose fathers get incarcerated, mothers on drugs, involved in prostitution, or maybe being trafficked. That's a very real thing. Um, so with all these contradictions, you have people who kind of end up alone and they need family.
Structure,
And so
organization.
if somebody comes along and they say, "Hey, I got your back," and they feed you and they clothe you and they tell you what's what and they teach you how to walk and teach you how to talk, you're going to look up to them people.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you have a father who is struggling, he may be a blue collar worker. He ain't really making much money, but then you got the hustler on the block who always has a Cadillac, who always has the 6'4" Impala with the D's on it, who always got this and that. You're going to look at that man and be like, that's more of a man than my dad because look how
He's got
well he's
stuff.
doing in life.
Yeah.
You don't know what he's doing to get that, but you just see the end result. And so you get hypnotized by the end result, right? So I think that gang culture has a lot of different things where people have loyalty to their family, right? They get born into something that they can't change because that's where their mama and their daddy from, right?
I
So
mean, man, isn't that the attraction, the same type of attraction that life in the military has for a lot of young men?
yeah,
Like being
or
part of a big organization that gives you structure, gives
yep,
you rules, gives you
yeah,
like
absolutely,
part of a bigger
right,
group.
yeah, and this idea of being disciplined
I
or
mean, we need that as
motivated,
males.
yeah,
We like that
right,
discipline, structure,
right,
organization. It's
yeah,
part of our DNA. So we crave that,
yeah.
but it has to come from a healthy
Right.
place.
It has to come from a healthy place. And I say it has to come from something higher than man. Because if your discipline and even motivation, I was talking about this the other day with a friend of mine. Like when we start talking about principles like discipline, motivation, so on and so forth, there I don't think there is an external stimulus for that. There can be, but that external stimulus is always going to be temporary, right? So you have to that has to come from a higher place, and this is where we start talking about your God-given purpose, right? You have to function off of your purpose and not your position in life. Like, this is where I am. This is where I live. This is where I grew up. These are my parents. These are my homies. This is where I work. You have to function off of who God made you, right? And that has nothing to do with what you do and what you have. Has everything to do with who you are. And that's where identity lies. But we get our identity from so many temporary things out here.
Let me ask you, man, because in this podcast, in this project, I talked about the hero's journey, which I'm sure you're
Hmm.
familiar with. And in a person's journey, there's always like a moment in which all of a sudden all that was before isn't part of you anymore, because you step into the unknown and you start a different journey in which
Right.
there's different rules, and you don't know who you are, and you have to like test yourself. Did you have like a specific moment in your personal story that you found yourself in this unknown reality in which you had to reinvent yourself?
I've had to do that over and over and over again, man. I think that's just a natural state of ever becoming in life. Because it's like you get to a stage or to a place where it's like, okay, I'm comfortable with being this. And then it's like, all right, and now something else comes up. And now you have to be something else,
Was
right?
that your decision, or you kind of found yourself in that and you had to like go
Yeah, some
roll with
of it
it?
was just like circumstantial. Like you find yourself with different circumstances that um that change from the ones that you were comfortable with. I mean, I got married when I was pretty young. I mean, that flung me into a thing, and then it's like you grow, discover more about yourself, and now it's like you get flung into something else, and then it's like you just ever changing, ever becoming. So yeah, there are several points where I've had to face things that I feared because I didn't understand. Like even going to college, I'm not gonna say um, scary, but it kind of I will say that because I didn't know anybody who did that before. And so it's like figuring out financial aid and what I wanted, and it's some
So you
paperwork
were
and
the first one of your family that kind of got out of the family's dynamics and patterns and ventured into
hmm
something
yeah. I mean, my
new.
mom went to school, but it was like a trade school in LA. I mean, as far as I know, I don't even think she graduated from that. But yeah, it was there was no nothing to kind of hold my hand and usher me into academia. It's just kind of like you end up on this college campus and you trying to navigate all of this paperwork and stuff because you know you want an education, right? And that was something that I value. So
What triggered the desire to go to college?
me wanting to be an architect
Why did you want to be an architect?
because of that building that I stood in front of, the Watts Towers, and I
Oh,
looked up
there
and
was
all, and I
the
said, somebody created this, and yeah, and it's like and there's the whole path to bringing that building into being. So, and I think that was something that, like, I'll even go back and say that I think that that's something that God instilled in me. When we look at the scriptures, the first command given to human beings is to be fruitful and multiply. I'm not talking about the commandments that came later, that came to Moses. I'm talking about the first thing that God says do. And then the first thing that God tells us about itself or himself is that he is creative because it says in the beginning God created. God made, right? God said it was good, right? So it's like we don't there's this thing where we start to develop these ideas around what we're here for, and we kind of make it up. But no matter what it is that you're into, you're here to create. You're here to be fruitful and multiply, and that's what the hero's journey is: ever becoming, step by step, more and more of what it is that you were meant to be,
absolutely, man.
right?
And in the journey, obviously, you have to some downfalls, and you have to face like
Hmm.
your own like
Yeah.
shadows and all that. I'm
Yep.
sure you went through a lot of that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a man by the name of Myron Golden, and he said something that was so brilliant. He said that resistance always follows intention,
Okay.
and that's proven over and over again when you look at the state or place of anything that exists, right? If we look at these cell phones that we have that are so wonderful now, right? There's a whole path of resistance that was met with bringing this into being. And even if we look at the natural world, when you plant a seed, that seed has to contend with heat, moisture, pressure, um, all kinds of forces before it breaks up and sees the light of day, and then it starts to grow. It doesn't bear fruit in the beginning. It goes through all of those different forces, right? It's the same when we start a project. We can have all the layers of thinking, self-doubt. Can I do this? Will I do that? Nobody's gonna do none, right? And so it's like you have to persevere through all that stuff anyway.
Why do you think this is the way it is, man? Why do we have to go through all these resistances?
Well, I don't know. That's just the way God made it. Because if everything was just instant access, you wouldn't appreciate it as much, right? Things that come easily to people, I just don't think that it's in human nature to respect it. So it's like you have to encounter some resistance. And sadly, you have people who adapt to not wanting to encounter resistance. They're not comfortable. They want to get to a place where they're comfortable. But comfort breeds weakness, right? Comfort will have you missing out on opportunities to become a better version of yourself, right? It's the same when in the gym, right? When people come in here and they say, "Hey, uh, my body fat percentage is 30%. My knees hurt. Da 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 da." Yeah, you're uncomfortable, right? Are you just trying to get to a state and place where you're comfortable? Because you can work out and have all those things that you just described not be true anymore. And then what do? You just stop. Mm. You go and you explore your body. You see what else you can do. You get up, you lose the weight, you feel great, you start lifting, you start doing all these different things, swimming, doing, and then it's like, okay, I think I'm gonna run a marathon, right? So now you can be known as the person who tells this story about how you overcame this to get over here and do that, right? And that's what life is about. Life is about ever becoming more and more of yourself. And when you stop doing that, you kind of stop living. So I think that's why that resistance is there. That's why we have to go through it, because that is just the process of living, moving from one thing to the next, and sometimes even going back to the thing that you left from before, right? To contend with it again. And I also say most times we think of the stuff that we go through, we take it personal, we make it about us. Me going from growing up in West California with all of those contradictions surrounding me, then going to college and studying architecture, and then echoing forth into like doing buildings and designing buildings and working as an architect, and then personal trainer and all this other stuff. What it is that I've become now ain't about me. It's so that I can help other people with my gift, right? And that's how the universe is structured. We think that it's a thing where it's like, oh, I've been through this, but what you've been through can help somebody else, right? And that's what we're here for. So, and I think that's also why that resistance becomes important, because when you lift that weight, now you can coach somebody else to do the same thing or something different.
So, man, what you're saying is we have to look at ourselves as part of a bigger ecosystem rather than just like being just us and our challenges, obstacles, our
Right.
fears. We are part of all of
The
this, just
greater
like a
mass.
building that
Yeah.
is that is part of the environment that has to be, I don't know how to say it, but included in the
Yeah.
nature, the surrounding
Integrated.
nature,
Yeah.
integrated in the
Yeah.
community.
A-
It's kind of the same. It's the same
Absolutely.
concept,
And
right?
you need to make your contribution. You have to make your contribution. Otherwise, you end up with what we describe as loneliness, unfulfilled, right? People who are bored. I say boredom is just the other side of creativity. The same time you sitting around talking about there's nothing for you to do, there's everything for you to do. There's a lot of different things that you can be doing aside from sitting there stressing about your problems and your bills and your this and your that and how unfair life is.
I wrote an article about this, man, about boredom, and I think today we look at boredom as something that is almost like a taboo. As soon as you're bored, you have to do something like
Right,
scroll, go on
right,
social
right.
media. But in boredom lies, a lot of great ideas or
Potential.
potential. Like
Yeah.
you have to be bored in order to birth
It's the
ideas
it's
and
the
visions.
potentiation of force, and that's why so many creative things came out of the pandemic. Can't call it that. Pandemic. Yeah. So many creative things.
It's part of the creative
Yeah.
process.
People
Getting
because
bored,
people were
being bored
yeah.
as hell.
People were sitting still and they were in the house and they were going stir crazy and they're like, all right,
Yeah,
fine,
yeah.
I'll go start the baked goods business. Fine, I'll start making hair care products. Fine, I'll start doing this. Fine, I'll start training people online.
Maybe we need more of those moments
Yeah.
in which
Right.
people can
But the
really
thing is,
tap into their
it
potential.
can be baked into your reality by just simply choosing. I'm sorry, deciding. Because making a choice is like, you're given your options. Deciding means that you look, you calculate, and then you cut off everything else. That's it, right? So I think that that can be baked into our experience. And even if we're working jobs, even if because I often hear people say things like, I don't have the time, I don't have the time, I don't have the time. Create the time. You have the same 20. I'm gonna quote I'm gonna quote Sugar Free. You know who Sugar Free
I
is?
don't know.
Sugar Free is a rapper from Pomona, California. Raps a lot about pimping,
Okay.
right? But he said in the podcast, he said, you have the
Oh, he has a
same.
podcast?
No, he was on one. He was featured
Oh,
on one.
okay.
And what he said was, it was crazy, but it was hella profound. He said, you have the same 24 hours as Michael Jackson and decided to become nobody. Think about that. The same 24 hours as the late great Michael Jackson,
Uh huh.
the king of pop.
The king of
You
pop.
have the same 24 hours and you decided to do nothing with your time. I thought that was a bar. I was like, man, Sugar Free to P. Shout
You
out
never
to
know
him.
where the great inspiration come from, right? It
Yeah,
can come from anyone.
So, and that's the thing. It's like, so listening to all of um, these different excuses that people layer on top of their day, it's like, yeah, you have to do that stuff, but bring some joy to it. As a matter of fact, let's talk a little bit about happiness and what that is. I think that we treat happiness as if it's the end result of achieving a thing. So people say, once I get my first $1 million,
I'll be
I can
happy.
be happy. Once my children graduate from school, I'll be happy. If you place your happiness on such fleeting things, you'll never be happy, right? I think that happiness is the fuel or the vehicle for your success as opposed to the result of it. On the way to getting my $1 million, I am happy. On the way to getting, my clients, I'm happy. On the way to my children graduating from school and me nurturing them through this process of education and, achieving, I am happy. And I'm teaching them to be the same.
Uh huh.
Your happiness is the vehicle or the fuel for your success and not the result of it. And this is why you have so many unhappy people in the world. You have people who have achieved so much. I had a client that was talking to me about a guy that was one of his clients. This man was worth tens of millions of dollars, and I think that his net worth went down by half, and he unalived himself. And it's like, are you serious? Because if you did that once, and what you did was fueled by happiness, you can do it again.
Uh huh.
I know people who have achieved great amounts of, wealth and everything, and they lost it all. And they got it right back. Why? Because they just tapped into what it is that they knew. They used their network, they used their happiness to fuel them back to what it is that they had.
Most of us have this idea that happiness is something we have to conquer. It's right over there. And when we do all these things that we do on a daily basis, we'll get there and then we'll be happy. What you're saying is choose happiness as a magnifying glass on what you're doing today. Is this making me happy? Yes. All right. Keep on doing it. And then don't worry about what's going to happen because eventually you'll make whatever you want to make by just focusing on today and you're happy today.
Not really. What I'm saying is, it does not matter what's happening today. I'm happy because happiness is a state of being. So you remember how I was talking about identity starting with beingness. You have be, do, have. What it is that I am gives rise to what I do, and that and the end result of that is what I have.
Okay.
So when you be the tree that bears the fruit that feeds the people, you always are taken care of, right? So if I'm a tree in a garden, I am a mango tree. Let's shout out the mango trees because they be
Which
here in
we
Miami.
love, man.
Yeah, be giving me the good ones, or a coconut tree, whatever. So, mango tree, and I grow just being a mango tree. Rather any, it don't matter who's in the environment. I'm still gonna grow and I'm gonna still produce fruit. Don't matter who's watching. Don't matter if I'm off in a back lot somewhere. I'm gonna still produce that fruit and I'm gonna drop that fruit to the ground and it's gonna nourish whoever comes along. Right? I'm just being. That's just it. And then what I do is produce that fruit over and over again, season after season. Produce that fruit. I drop it to the ground, and and then I have now those seeds that are inside of those mangoes becomes more of what it is that I am, right? And so it's this echoing forth of becoming that more, right? And so now you have more of what it is that you are. Now you have people who look at you with joy and delight. Why? Because you provided them with sweet, juicy fruit season after season, and they can count on you for it, right? And now those people appreciate you. So when anything threatens our mango tree, we're not gonna let anything cut our mango tree down. Why? Because we love it.
Let me say something about this, man. So I understand, but so in order for you to go through all of this process, first of all, you need to know that you are a mango tree,
Correct.
and that's not easy.
It's not, but it's only not easy because people have not looked at themselves without considering all of the labels that have been placed on them.
Correct.
So you have to remove all of the
It's
noise
simple,
of
but
the
it's not
world.
easy.
It's not. Yeah.
Because a lot of people are mango trees, but they want to be whatever, an avocado tree
Yeah.
or anything.
Yeah.
So that's the first step. You need to figure out what kind of tree you are.
Correct. Yep.
And once you know that, you know what kind of fruits you can give.
Absolutely.
So how do you? Let me ask you this: how do you get to the point where you know what kind of tree you are?
You have to understand the voice that you're listening to. So sometimes we will take on attributes from people that we love and we will hold on to them just because we love them, right? So if my grandmother,
Family and friends.
yeah,
Yes.
families, friends, people that tell us that
They can
love
make a
us
lot of
and
damage, man.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So and we'll take on those things. So you know, a friend of mine has this process that she introduced me to called inquiry. And it's where you take a thought that you have, whether it's about yourself or a scenario or whatever, and it can be your job, and you write that thought down. And then you ask yourself, you go through the process of inquiring, you have these different questions that you ask that surround whether or not this thing is true. So if I sit down and I write, I am X, Y, and Z, da 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 da, da, and I have this drawn out description about myself. I have to sit down and write and look at that and ask myself whether or not that's true, and
Or
be,
where is it coming from?
and where is it coming
Was it
from?
planted in my head from someone else?
Correct. So the process of inquiry could help with discovering what kind of tree you are.
So essentially, it's a stripping down of unnecessary
Noise,
noise. Yes.
noise.
But
That's
how
it.
how do you do that?
Some of
How
it.
did you do it?
Oh, how did I do it?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I think for me, it just became the process of me just being comfortable in my own skin and not accepting what other people impose on me based on the position that I'm in, the role that I'm in, so on and so forth. I've worked for several different places. I have been a bicycle courier. I've been a elementary school teacher. I've been a college professor. I've been a cook. I've been a jazz radio station host. I've been a personal trainer. I've done architecture. I've done all of these roles, but none of them were positions that defined who I was. I brought the same level of love and care to all of those things. And that just came down to like me doing that based on who I am. right? So deciding what kind of person you are, deciding who you are, just comes down to not getting so hypnotized by the position that you're in. Like, this is where you are in life, but this is not who you are.
Whether you're a CEO of a company or you're homeless in the streets.
Correct. Like, it's like your character is something that will always shine forward from this and not this, right? So I think some of it does come down to, like the Bible says, the wise man sees with the eyes that are in his head, right? Understanding how to allow something higher to examine your heart, which is another thing that is in the Bible. It's may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight, right? So understanding like what language is taking place here, what language is taking place here, and how do those two things connect, and how does that result in how you communicate with the world?
You mentioned the Bible, man. I know you're a believer. Did you have a were you always, or you had like a moment in which like
I think I've
the
always
light
been,
came down on you?
no, I think I've always been a believer in something higher. It's just, I mean, I read the Bible maybe 5 or 6 times on, just over the course of my life. So I think that when you understand what's there, it becomes powerful. But I mean, I made Shahada to become Muslim. My mother's a minister, and I left the church probably when I was around 16 or 17, and then I had this mentor named Makau Ukta in Mississippi, and he was an imam of a community called New Medina.
Imam
And
is the Muslim leader.
yeah, and so this was a community of people that had their own school. They built their houses. They had well water. They lived down there, and but he had this bookstore, and when I started learning from him, I made sure how to become Muslim, and I was doing that for a while. And I mean, there's just all these things that sort of inform my path. So I don't think that it's just the Bible that I look at. It is probably the thing that I reference most, but I also have an understanding of all the other religious texts. So I've read the Bhagavad Gita, I've read
Oh,
the Tao Te Ching, I've read the Yi Ching. I mean, so there's so many different books that have stellar information.
uh huh.
But as far as being a believer, I just look at it as me being a believer in something higher and knowing that there's something more than just what we see in this world, and that informs a lot of what it is that I do.
Let me ask you, man. I'm curious about your Muslim experience. We hear a lot of like I don't want to say negative, but a lot of noise about Muslim. But
Mhm.
obviously, I don't buy into it. What are some things that resonate with you, like in the Muslim lifestyle, Muslim religion? Is
Mhm.
because
It's
we don't know much. What we know is like through the movies, and obviously the
yeah,
movies like the Muslim guys, the terrorists, and all of that. But
right.
obviously, like it's
So
fabrication.
I'm gonna go on record and say that there are also Christian terrorists. There are people who do things in the name of God, in the name of Christianity,
I
in the
mean,
name of
look at the
Christendom.
Crusades or
Yeah, and
in South
those.
America.
So anybody. So that's just human beings, being human beings on that level. So I don't think that has anything to do with like who people pray to or what language they use to pray or whatever. Islam is a very beautiful religion. In Within Islam, you will find devotion, you will find purity of heart, you will find people who love from a place that is, the only way that I can describe it is pure,
Yeah.
right? So those are the Muslims I know. I mean, as far as all the noise around like the boogeyman that people need to create,
Yeah.
right? Again, that's just, to me, that's just the boogeyman. That's
Hmm.
that's people using those things, and that's not to say that people don't do things in the name of Islam that are that can be considered wrong, but then we also have to consider context. I always think of, if we're going to talk about the whole terrorist thing, right? You have a young man who is 7 years old in Yemen, and it's sort of like the same scenario as I described as a young man who becomes a gang member, right? You come along and you have the U.S. forces. They bomb his village. They disrupt his life in a way that will never ever come back.
A lifetime of trauma.
Lifetime of trauma, right? They kill his aunt. They kill his mother. They kill his uncle. They kill his goat. They kill his it. They do. And now this young kid has nobody. And somebody comes along and says, "Hey, do you want revenge?" And he says, "Yes." Right?
It's an automatic human
Yeah.
reaction.
And then they offer him, they say, "Hey, if you do this thing, you'll end up with 70 virgins and you'll go to heaven and Allah will grant you peace and you'll get to see your family again." You're talking to a young child who has a robust imagination and a whole lot of trauma to match it.
Hmm.
So of course he's gonna make the decisions to go off and do something that we would consider wrong, right? But we also have to consider context and what gave rise to those conditions. I don't like how when it comes to Western culture, we have a tendency to separate the fingers from the hand. We want to look at the smoke, but not at the fire that caused it. We have to start asking some questions about the way that things are done in a political sense, right? So that's all I'm gonna say about that because I don't want to get too right
I remember,
from
man, I
here.
was here in Miami like a couple years ago. I was driving and I was behind this car, and the lady had "Support Our Troops" sticker. And I started thinking, I was like, oh, I mean, that's beautiful. Probably her son is in the military and she's expressing solidarity for everyone who's living their life, and I respect that.
Right.
But then I thought about, I'm sure there's a mother in Russia or China, and her son is in the military also, and is doing exactly the same thing as the American
Yeah.
soldier. So which one is on the right
Yeah.
side and which one is on the wrong side?
Who's right? Who's
Because if
wrong?
I
and-
look at from the Russian mother's perspective, she thinks that her son is in the right side.
Correct.
And if I
Right.
look at from the Chinese or the American, it's the same thing. So I was like, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy?
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, I had no idea.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the show The Walking Dead?
I've seen some episodes.
Okay. I always think of it in the context of The Walking Dead. You have all these different people around that have their group.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you have Rick and his bunch, and then you have all these other people, and they form these communities. And somehow the show is just um, written from the perspective of Rick and his group always being in the right, even though everybody's after the same thing. They're after resources, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like they do these things and they trade, and then eventually it's like, okay, now we got to go and fight these people and turn them into zombies because we don't like something that they did, right?
Uh-huh.
Who's right or wrong in a scenario?
Who's right or
You
wrong?
just never know. And this is why I don't like to look at the world in the context of right and wrong. I like to look at it as appropriate and inappropriate, right? So if we're talking about war and you're saying that you have to go to war, what is the reason behind it? And furthermore, is this reasoning appropriate for what it is that you want to see exist in the world, or is it inappropriate? Because if you're talking about, you know, going to war in order to create peace, is that appropriate? Is there another way that can be done? Right? Because you got to understand that if you hit these people and these people are strong and these people are just as emotionally tied to their ideas about the world as you are, you got to understand that they're going to come back. You got to understand that there's going to be some sort of repercussion for doing this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But
The
people
thing
don't
is,
think about
man,
it
yeah,
like
it's
that.
it's fascinating. I mean, I've been living a little bit all over the world and hanging out with like all different people, and it's funny, man. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Jewish, gay, black, whatever. We all want exactly the same
The
thing. So
same
this whole
thing.
idea of
Yep.
division, that you gotta hate this guy, or he speaks a different language, or he prays to a different god, is all like a man-made fabrication.
It is.
To me, it's pretty
Yeah.
disgusting.
It's culture. It's culture at its finest, and it is us having rules and ideas and responses that have been fed to us, and you're saying that you're of this culture and this is what you do.
And that's
You're
why
of
you
that
have to
culture,
believe.
and this is why you and and you never question any of it. You just kind of like, all right, this is what I am.
Yeah.
And then it's like, now everybody has to be this. But why? I used to always question that, and even in terms of Christianity, even though I believe in the tenets that come from the Bible and the principles that come out of the Bible, I don't consider myself Christian. I don't use that word to describe myself. Why? Because it's loaded with so many different things, right?
That you don't associate
That
with.
I don't associate with.
I I
You see what I'm saying?
I
So it's
I get that.
like as far as labels go, I don't I don't do those.
It's hard, man, because I'm the same way. But it's hard because I understand that as humans, we have this desire to find our own
Our group.
tribe,
Yeah, yeah.
so that we associate with things because that makes us feel a little bit more, like part of a bigger picture.
Hmm.
Like whether I'm a Christian, or I'm
Hmm.
this, or I'm that. I'm part of this club or whatever.
Right.
But if you question all those rules and are like, no, I don't like this. I don't want to be associated with this. You're all of a sudden you're alone, and a
Right.
lot of people cannot handle that.
You won't be alone because at the same time you have people who are shifting and changing and questioning things and shifting perspective. Now you give rise to a whole nother other. You go over here when you have people that will completely agree with what it is that you're looking at.
But at the same time, people will look at you as like you're like the weirdo because, well, you're going to church but you're not Christian.
Hmm.
You're from this country but you don't do things that people from this country do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see it in people that when they come across someone like this,
Hmm.
they're a little bit, like
Yeah.
they don't know how
Yeah.
to like gauge it.
And that's where communication comes in. If you don't know how to communicate, right? And that's I think that's one of the things that will help harmonize a lot of folks in the world who do even cling to like separate identities. I mean, it's okay to have your identity. It's okay to say that you're Christian. It's okay to say that you're Muslim. I have friends who are both.
Hmm.
I have loved ones in my family who are both, right? I mean, but do I have to have such an emotional tie to my thing? I don't know, right? Because at some point, one of the other things that I got from Asian philosophy, only hard, brittle things break, right? When you have a tree that dries completely up, right? The wind is gonna knock that tree over because it's dry, it's brittle. So when you move through life and you have these rigid rules about whatever it is, right? Everybody has to be. I remember reading a book, and in the inside of the book, the guy wrote an inscription that said Islam or hell. And it was, it was, I was like, yeah, that turned me off to the book because now it's like, I don't know if I want to read this now. Especially because when he handed it to me, he said that it was the only his book and the Holy Quran was the only two books you will ever need to read. I'm like, I don't think that's true.
So, but let me ask you this, man: if a man has to always question all these things, what are the unquestionable things, the values that they never change, that make someone's like principles?
Immutable truths like love. Love is the ability to give to a person, a cause, a place, a thing, or whatever. Is your ability to give to that thing, seeking nothing in return. And that is an immutable truth that exists in the universe. And that is the matrix on which the world, the universe is actually built on, right? You don't have, and I'll take this back to fruit as an example. You don't have a fruit tree that gives begrudgingly. It just produces fruit and it drops it. And then it creates more. And then it drops those trees grow and they drop more. And this is why you end up with groves, right? This is why you end up with trees spread out all over a large area that have the same characteristics,
Mm-hmm.
right? It doesn't withhold. So your ability to love is just that, right? And that is something that once we learn how to master doing that, we can then fulfill our roles in this life without always seeking a end goal, right? Without always wanting something back from the person that we're giving to. As a matter of fact, when you have the ability to do that, you get even more.
Unconditional love.
You get even more. also say like that drives your ability to connect, that drives your ability to contribute, that drives your ability to communicate, that drives your ability to, right, and to have empathy for other people. Empathy is actually a superpower, right? No matter what it is that someone is experiencing or what their lifestyle is, if you can empathize with the fact that that person wants the same exact thing that you do, warmth, shelter,
It's
food.
universal.
Yep, exactly. So, when we start there and we understand that the universe, the matrix of the universe is abundant, as opposed to, what we see in the world now where everybody's talking about how scarce things are, right? We're gonna run out of this. We're gonna run out of that. The economy is contracting. Uh, eh, blah blah blah. Whatever.
I believe in that too, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if the
The universe is full of abundance everywhere.
we have food sources all around us that we completely ignore every day on our way to a grocery store that sells us food for money that we exchange our labor for. That's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Every time I see them guys out there cutting down the coconuts off the tree, I'll be like, hey, give me some of those.
But we buy into that idea of culture so much that it has become our reality.
Yeah. I got coconut water sitting in a container I got from Publix, and it's a coconut tree right over here. Why?
To conclude, man, because we nearing the almost hour and a half.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know,
It's been
right?
that long?
Yeah, yeah.
No way.
I mean, there's a lot of things I would like to ask you, but in what part of the hero's journey are you now, and what are the main lessons that you have learned so far in this? I mean, we've already touched on a few of them, but if you wanted to share some other things or like particular moments that like kind of give you more insights on this journey that you're on.
So, as a 48, the 48-year-old me is very, very, very comfortable in his skin. I don't I don't mince words for nobody. And I also don't feel the need to play defense. The ability to love has gotten easier for me at this stage. The ability to just genuinely connect with people has gotten easier. The ability to function from the set of principles that give rise to my, I don't want to say position, I want to say purpose, that give rise to my purpose, right? I operate out of my purpose a lot more, no matter what's going on. And I find that the more I do that, the more receptive people become to learning from me, to listening to me, to understanding what my gift is, and being receptive to me helping them with my gift, right? So my role as a personal trainer is one of the most fulfilling things that I've ever done. Mostly because it's like I can impact people's lives in that moment, and that's my gift, right? I had a client that had a bunch of shoulder pain or something. He went off and did some traveling for a couple weeks. One session back with me, he sends me a text message. My shoulder feels a lot better, and it's moments like that that really that fuel me, that drive me to want to do more of that thing.
Wow.
So that's where I am now, just comfortable in my skin, and rather than looking for areas of opportunity to exploit, I'm always looking at how can I help. Anytime I'm sad, go find somebody to help. Anytime I'm depressed, go create something, go find somebody to help, right? And that's where I am.
Wow, man. Last minute, is there anything that you want to say, share, or something you forgot that you wanted to put out there? This is all like
Man, just
random.
this was a wonderful experience, and I would love to do it again.
Yeah,
We
man,
gotta
for
do a
sure. Because I have more
part two.
questions,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm sure there's more things I wanted to ask you more about the architecture
Oh
and
yeah,
how you
yeah.
view
That's a whole
architecture.
different discussion we can
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
So let's just say this is end of part one, and we'll. I mean, man, you live like 3 doors down,
Yeah,
so I mean, we
right,
can do it
exactly.
whenever
We
we want.
neighbors. Yeah,
But man, I appreciate.
for
I
sure.
appreciate. Thank you very much
Yeah.
for
Thank
sharing
you
your
for having
story,
me, man.
and we'll do it again.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Ciao.